Behe writes that the simplest self-sufficient cell has the capacity to produce thousands of different proteins and other molecules. Synthesis, degradation, energy generation, replication, maintenance of cell architecture, mobility, regulation, repair, communication. All of these functions take place in virtually every cell, and each function itself requires the interaction of numerous parts. A child can die because of a single defect in one of the many machines needed for taking proteins to the lysosome. A single flaw in the cell's protein transport pathway is fatal. Unless the entire system were immediately in place, our ancestors would have died. He concludes that attempts at a gradual evolution are a recipe for extinction. Behe further rebukes the scientific community for ignoring the evidence. He says the impotence of Darwinian theory in accounting for the molecular basis of life is evident from the complete absence in the professional scientific literature of any detailed models by which complex biochemical systems could have been produced. In the 20th century, other noteworthy scientists have agreed. World-renowned astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle rejected Darwin's theory. It was Hoyle who coined the phrase, the Big Bang. He was, in fact, mocking the idea that all things came about through some great explosion billions of years ago. Hoyle calculated that the odds of producing just the basic enzymes of life by chance are 1 in 1 with 40,000 zeros after it. Hoyle claims that believing the first cell originated by chance is like believing a tornado could sweep through a junkyard filled with airplane parts and form a Boeing 747. He said, the scientific world has been bamboozled into believing that evolution has been proved. Nothing could be further from the truth. Hoyle said this situation is well known to geneticists, and yet nobody seems to blow the whistle decisively on the theory. Most scientists still cling to Darwinism because of its grip on the educational system. You either have to believe the concepts or be branded a heretic. Australian biologist Michael Denton, author of the book Evolution, A Theory in Crisis, says science has so thoroughly discredited Darwinian evolution that it should be discarded. Meanwhile, mathematics professor Wolfgang Smith says evolution is a metaphysical myth, totally bereft of scientific sanction. At the British Museum of Natural History in London, paleontologist Colin Patterson started asking other scientists to tell him one thing they knew about evolution. Lecturing to biologists at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, he said, I tried that question on the geology staff at the Field Museum of Natural History, and the only answer I got was silence. I tried it on the members of the Evolutionary Morphology Seminar in the University of Chicago, a very prestigious body of evolutionists, and all I got there was silence for a long time, and eventually one person said, I do know one thing, it ought not to be taught in high school. In spite of the evidence, Patterson did not abandon evolution. He says, then I woke up and realized that all my life I had been duped into taking evolutionism as revealed truth in some way. He said he had experienced a shift from evolution as knowledge to evolution as faith. What Patterson described was his own paradigm shift from scientist to Darwinian worshipper. His idol, the cathedral of evolutionary thought. This trend among scientists has been acknowledged by others in the scientific community.
The building behind me is London's Natural History Museum. It looks rather like a cathedral or a church, and in a way that's what it is. It's a kind of temple to Darwin's theory of evolution. People come to museums like the Natural History Museum to get answers to their question, have we evolved from apes? Do humans and apes share a common ancestor? And to look at an exhibit like this, you'd think that question had been answered decisively yes. But the answer is far from decisive. In fact, This representation is an interpretation of the fossils, the interpretation of one group of scientists. There are other interpretations, but you won't find them in this museum or any other museum in the world.
In the days of early America, the Founding Fathers held few doubts that man had been created rather than evolved. The Declaration of Independence says plainly, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." The Founding Fathers maintained that the rights and liberties of men were defended by the authority of God, who created them. But if mankind merely evolved, then a man's rights are established only by man's opinion. As that opinion changes, the rights of men can also change, as was the case in Nazi Germany.
Hitler believed that evolution was true and the inferior races need to be eliminated, and he had a list.
Hitler's opinion was that Jews and people considered genetically inferior should be eliminated from society. The Nazis relied upon the Darwinian view of the natural selection of favored races to further their own ideas on the struggle for life. In fact, Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, means my struggle, a struggle the Nazis clearly defined as demonstrated by this propaganda film. In the opening scene, the narrator makes direct reference to Darwin's teaching on natural selection.
Alles Lebensschwache geht in der Natur unfehlbar zugrunde. Wir Menschen haben gegen dieses Gesetz der natürlichen Auslese in den letzten Jahrzehnten furchtbar gesündigt. Wir haben unwertes Leben nicht nur erhalten, wir haben ihm auch Vermehrung gewährt. Die Nachkommen dieser Kranken sahen so aus. Erbgesunde Menschen wohnten in engen, lichtlosen Gassen und halb verfallenen Lauben. Idioten und Schwachsinnigen baute man aber Paläste, und diese kranken Menschen waren gar nicht empfänglich für die Schönheit, mit der man sie umgab. Das deutsche Volk kennt das ganze Ausmaß dieses Elends wohl kaum. Es kennt nicht den drückenden Geist jener Häuser, in denen Tausende lallende Schwachsinnige künstlich ernährt und gepflegt werden müssen, die tiefer stehen als jedes Tier. In den letzten 70 Jahren hat sich unser Volk um 50% vermehrt, während die Zahl der Erbkranken im gleichen Zeitraum um 450% gestiegen ist. Wenn diese Entwicklung so weiterliefe, würde schon in 50 Jahren auf 4 gesunde Menschen ein Erbkranker kommen. Ein endloser Zug des Grauens würde in die Nation hineinmarschieren. Maßloses Elend über ein wertvolles Volk kommen, das dann mit Riesenschritten seinem Ende entgegenginge.
Die jüdische Bevölkerung Baltis wird in Sammellager gebracht. Das sind jene Ostjudentypen, die besonders nach dem Weltkriege die Großstädte Mittel- und Westeuropas überschwemmten, wo sie als Parasiten ihre Gastvölker zersetzten und tausendjährige Kulturen zu vernichten drohten.
Under evolutionary influence, Hitler declared, "I have the right to exterminate millions of individuals of inferior races which multiply like vermin." While Germany had been a democratic society, the Nazis evolved German law and changed it to suit their own wicked desires. In the Bible, God says, "I am the Lord, I change not." Jesus said, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away." It is for this reason that the principles and teachings of the Bible were considered so important by early Americans. Sir William Blackstone maintained that man-made laws should not be allowed to contradict the laws of God. And if man's laws did contradict God's laws, Blackstone stated they were not valid. In Acts 5:29, the apostles taught, "We ought to obey God rather than men." In the Bible, God reveals that because man was made in God's image, he holds a particular place above every creature on earth. Man is not equal to the beasts of the field, but he would be if all life evolved from a common source. If that were the case, killing a man would be no different than killing an insect, or a cow, or a carrot.